In this video, I'll walk you through the process that I use for setting Marquise-shaped stones in a weave setting. For this project, I'll be using two 6-inch segments of 16-gauge half round, two 6-inch segments of 20-gauge half round, and 4 feet of 28-gauge round. My 28-gauge and both my 16 gauges are in dead soft, and my two 20 gauges are in half hard. One of the most popular questions I see is, can I substitute wires for round wires? And in most cases, absolutely. You can definitely use only round wire for techniques like this. However, using something with an edge, like half round, will make your life a lot easier. The edge of the half round wire gives some sort of shape for our weaving 28 gauge to compress to. This will help it stay in place instead of trying to expand down the wires, kind of like an accordion, opening and closing. With round wire as the cores here, it's much easier for that 28 gauge weave to slip. It makes it more difficult for us to set our stones. For the setting wires that we're using, in this case, our 20 gauge half rounds, I really would recommend trying either a half round or a square wire for this. The lower profile of the half round will make it much easier for you to set the stones and for them to be held securely without creating much vertical bulk over the stones. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into today's project. I'm going to be setting 3 Marquise-shaped garnets. I'm going to begin my weave using just one of my 16 gauges. And I'm going to secure the end of our 28 gauge to that wire. We can reduce the amount that this wire can slip on our 16 gauge by compressing it to the wire with our pliers. With this ready to go, we're going to add our remaining half rounds. On the outside edge to the left, we'll have our other 16 gauge, and in the center, we'll have both of our 20 gauges. Our 20 gauge half rounds are going to be placed one on top of the other, with the flat sides facing down towards the bottom of our weave. I'm pinching with my thumb and my forefinger on my left hand, and I'll be weaving with my right hand. I'm going to come over the top of my rightmost half round and down in between the 16 gauge on the right and both of the half rounds in the center. I'll then come back up to the center underneath my two 20 gauges and over the top of my leftmost 16 gauge. I'm going to bring my 28 gauge all the way around that wire, so I have one complete rotation around that post. I'll then bring our 28 gauge back up to the front and over the top of both of the 20 gauges. It'll dive towards the back and be secured into our starting position. If we're looking down the barrel of the weave, we have one 16 gauge here and one 16 gauge here. In the center, we have two 20 gauge half rounds. This is what our pattern would look like. Starting here, we're going around, and then underneath. Once fully around, over the top, once fully around. In this case, I started with my 28 gauge on the bottom. If you get back to your starting wire and find that it's on top of the wire, somewhere in the pattern we made a mistake. One thing that makes it easier for me to keep track of as I'm working is that I'm always going over and then under, and over and under for each pass through the pattern. I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same pattern twice more. Now that we have all 4 of our core wires secured, it's time to move on to our first setting. Before adjusting our weave, we're going to take both of our 20 gauge half rounds and bend them straight up away from the surface of our 16 gauges. For our next pattern, I'm going to coil 5 times around my rightmost 16 gauge, and then cross over and do 5 coils around the leftmost. When I go to cross over, I've crossed underneath to the opposite side. Once I have my 5 coils, I can cross underneath to the right side to be back in my starting position. To work this out together on paper once again, we have 16 gauge number 1 and 16 gauge number 2. Our 20 gauges are bent vertically away from the surface of this weave. We're going to start by doing our 5 coils before crossing underneath to the opposite side. If we're staring down the barrel, it should create a figure 8 pattern between these 2 wires. If we're looking down on the surface, and these are our 2 16 gauge, it should look something like this. Eliminating as much space as possible between each rotation of the round and the coils on the sides will help us prevent any slipping of the wire so that our stones stay nice and secure. The 5 coils around each side serves 2 purposes. Our first purpose is that it gives us a nice open space for the Q-lit, the pointy part, at the back of the stone to sink down into the weave, helping to secure it from the bottom. The second is that these coils around each side save us wire as opposed to crossing back and forth each time until we reach the length of the stone. I'm going to go ahead and repeat our weave twice more. My 5 coils around just the right, cross down to the other side, 5 coils around the left side. With our 5 coils in place, we'll cross back to our starting wire to do our second rotation through the pattern. There should be just enough weave for our stone to be able to comfortably sit on top of, just ending past the point of the stone. My stones are 3 by 6 millimeter, and this looks to be about the perfect amount of weave underneath. To prepare our setting for the stones, we're going to bend both of our 20 gauges back to the surface of the piece. I've bent each wire out to either side, and I'll fold them back in towards the center, first with whichever one is on top. In my case, the one going out to the left is sitting on top of the one to the right, so I'm going to bring that over, parallel to our right wire, and then take our right wire into the position the left one was in. From here, we're going to revert back to our first weave pattern, going in between each of the 3 sections. So we're coming over the top of our rightmost 16 gauge and underneath both 20 gauges, over the top of our leftmost 16 gauge, around once, coming up from the back, over the top of both of the 20 gauges, straight back through to the back. At this point, we're back to our first weave, crossing in between each of the 3 sections. To make space for our stone, we'll bend both of our 20 gauges back to parallel in the center, and bend both down through the bottom of the weave. My favorite tool for this next part is one of these really small flathead screwdrivers. This came in a glasses repair case, and I've been using it for years. You could alternatively use a toothpick, or maybe even really small pliers. The idea is to slide your tool underneath both of the 20 gauge half rounds and bend it up so we have a nice arch to slide the stone under. To set our stone, we're going to place it underneath the arch, with the pointy part of the stone facing down into our weave. Very carefully with my thumbs, I'm pressing down our 20 gauge to secure over the stone. Once we have them down till they're about parallel with the top of the stone, we can bring them both back to the surface of the weave. To To tighten everything in place from here, we're going to make sure that it is compressed so that there's no space in those coils on the sides. And then we can gently pull them out to either direction to secure the top of the stone into place. With that stone set, I'll go ahead and bend my 20 gauges back away from the surface and weave for our next setting. I went ahead and wove underneath the setting for the next stone, so let's go ahead and prep our top wires together. I'm bending them both back parallel to the surface of our setting, taking my leftmost wire, which is on top, over to the other side first, and then bringing the right wire to the left side. From here, we'll go back to our 3-part weave. Once we have those wires secured, we can bring them parallel again, back through to the back of the piece, and then slide our tool to create enough space to slide the next stone into. Once I have the second stone in place, I can take my pliers and pinch between these two settings. That'll lock these two wires above our first stone into place before we move forward. Once the third stone is set, we can pinch this connection as well. I went ahead and set our third stone, so I'm going to pinch that section between our second and third before returning all of my wires back to my first weave section once again. With that stone locked into place, our element is complete. We have 3 marquise-shaped stones set with the culettes, the pointy part, facing towards the bottom, so we get the maximum light reflection on the surface. A special thank you goes out to all the names on your screen for supporting this channel through Patreon. What I'm doing would not be possible without your support. If you're interested in helping support the channel, follow the link in the description below this video. If you found this video helpful, leave me a like on the video. It helps me a lot with the visibility of my videos in YouTube's algorithms. To be the first to know when I upload new content, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to be notified when new videos are available. Thank you for watching, and happy rapping.